Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast. That is, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. I'm Paul Gigot here on Potomac Watch with Elliot Kaufman and Kate Batchelder Odell. The speech, Elliot said it was effective. I agree with that. I thought it was effective. He defended the campaign in Gaza, both militarily and in moral terms, the efforts of Israelis to limit civilian casualties. He laid out in general terms what the Israeli strategy is for post-war Gaza, which I thought was eminently sensible, in that he said basically we want it to be run by Palestinians who believe that Israel actually has a right to exist. That's not too unreasonable. He also linked the U.S. and Israeli national interest as democracies in stopping Iran's goal of destroying the United States as the great Satan. Kate, when you think about the impact of this on the Democratic coalition, Israel has now become an issue that divides Democrats. Republicans are pretty much still united on the point, but Democrats have become increasingly divided with the protesters and the boycotts, and that has implications for how Kamala Harris might approach the question. Will she differ from her boss, President Biden? She's meeting with Netanyahu one-on-one, which is good, and Netanyahu is also meeting with Biden and with Trump, heading down to Mar-a-Lago for that. But what about the impact on Harris?
Well, I think her core instincts are less sympathetic to Israel than Biden's are, and I think that is underscored by the people she surrounds herself with. And she also just has a much shorter paper trail on some of these issues and has just in general been much more willing to placate her progressive base on pretty much every substantive policy issue. She also has, as an attorney general background, much less experience in foreign affairs than some of the Democratic competition. But I do think this speech made the catering to the Gaza protesters much more difficult for her. One thing I thought Netanyahu did really well was framing at the 30,000-foot level that what Israel is facing is a struggle between civilization and barbarism. And I think the people burning flags and vandalizing property outside his speech really drove that point home. I also thought his depiction, for instance, an Ethiopian immigrant fighting in the IDF, a Muslim soldier fighting in the IDF, he really underscored the extent to which Israel is a pluralistic democracy like the United States. I thought he did a great job on some of the common interests the United States has with Israel. Maybe as a mild thought might have talked more about why what happens in Israel and Gaza won't stay there. I think the Houthis are an example of that Las Vegas rules don't apply. But clearly on the mere question of the Democrats, I think Kamala Harris today put out a statement condemning the protests, which featured Hamas flags. She condemned those protests, and I think that's a sign that it's a political liability for her that's growing, and that being associated with that kind of barbarism and disorder is not going to help her against Trump in the fall.
Certainly her decision, Elliot, as Kate says, to come out and criticize the protesters, a day late, obviously, but still she criticized them, is a point to underscoring the potential political dangers she thinks she might face here, because in doing so could court more protests between now and the Democratic Convention on August 19th. I think what she probably will do is not try to make any big breakout on this issue, but kind of slipstream behind President Biden, who's trying to negotiate a ceasefire agreement with Israel and Hamas. And if that can be struck with a hostage exchange of some kind and a downturn in the fighting, President Biden will hail it as a great victory, hail the peacemakers, and Harris will then try to take advantage of that as well. And there's a chance, you've been telling me, that they could strike that deal.
I think that's right. They want to quiet the issue, and there is a reasonable chance. Israel's parliament, the Knesset, goes on recess soon. You can't bring down a government during a recess. And so it's an opportune moment for Netanyahu to strike a deal when his government can't be brought down by various right-wing coalition partners.
Is that where the opposition in Israel is right now to a deal?
Yes, on the right, because they worry a deal will mean the end of the war, Hamas survives and wins and rebuilds. I think that's a reasonable fear, which is why Netanyahu is trying to strike a different kind of deal, one that will allow him to resume the war. If that could happen, well, that's trouble for Kamala Harris. Once again, her base becomes split on that. And I would note, Prime Minister Netanyahu is a big believer in American public opinion. His whole movement, actually, going back to its founder, Jabotinsky, believes in American public opinion as something that can be mobilized and put to positive use. So when a president tells him, our policy is this, he says, well, that may be so, but you have a Congress too, and you have an angry electorate, and maybe I can use that and try to change that policy of yours. And so I expect some more of that.
Well, Israel over the decades has benefited enormously from bipartisan support, that is, in both parties. Harry Truman endorsed the foundation of Israel, and Democrats supported it for years. And this division in Democratic public opinion, relatively recent on the political left. And Netanyahu, I think, was smart not to try to make his speech partisan in any way, to call upon support from both parties. There was an implicit criticism of President Biden's policy for a time of withholding some weapons from Israel. But what you want to see if you're Israel, and I think from the point of view of American national interest, is Israel not become a partisan issue in the United States. Just to finish up, Elliot.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's difficult to do now, when one side, as you said, is firmly pro-Israel, the other side is split. So whatever he can do to sort of keep that other side on board, it's important for him. And so that means praising President Biden, even though he thinks President Biden has been trying to undermine him and get him out of power for a year now, praising President Biden, lifting him up for the good policies. At the same time, he has to worry about President Trump. It's a tough balance there to strike.
And Trump has expressed frustration with Netanyahu because Netanyahu, quite sensibly in my view, had, after the election in the United States, had said, congratulations to Joe Biden. But Donald Trump didn't want to hear that at the time. And of course, we know he holds grudges. So let's stop there for today. I want to thank Kate Odell. Thank you, Kate. And thank you, Elliot. And thank you all for listening. We're here every day on Potomac Watch in what has been one of the great momentous months in American politics. Thanks for listening.